The autumn rain pelted against the tall windows of the Franklin County Courthouse, creating a rhythmic drumming that echoed through the marble corridors. Inside Courtroom 4B, the air felt thick with tension and the weight of broken promises. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed softly, casting a sterile glow over the polished wooden benches and the American flag standing sentinel in the corner. 8-year-old Emma Carter sat on the hard wooden bench behind her mother's attorney, her small frame nearly swallowed by the adult-sized seat. Her patent leather shoes, the nice ones her mother had bought especially for today, dangled several inches above the floor, swinging slightly with nervous energy. But it was her eyes that told the real story. Those wide, brown eyes that once sparkled with childhood wonder now held something else entirely, a darkness that no 8-year-old should ever know. Pressed against Emma's right leg was Bailey, a 3-year-old golden retriever whose honey-colored coat seemed to glow even in the artificial light. The dog wore a blue vest clearly marked, "Service Dog Do Not Pet," and he sat with perfect stillness, his intelligent eyes alert and watchful. Every few seconds, Bailey would glance up at Emma, as if checking on her, as if he could sense the storm of emotions swirling inside the small girl's chest. It had been exactly 6 months and 4 days since Emma had spoken a single word. 186 days of silence. Judge Margaret Reynolds entered the courtroom with the measured steps of someone who had walked this path thousands of times before. At 62, she had presided over more custody cases than she cared to count. She'd seen parents at their worst, lying, manipulating, using their children as weapons in their wars against each other. But she'd also seen parents at their best, willing to sacrifice everything for their child's well-being. The question was always, which kind were in her courtroom today? "All rise," Bailiff Marcus Johnson announced, his deep voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. Everyone stood, everyone except Emma, who remained frozen in her seat until her mother, Sarah, gently touched her shoulder. Only then did the little girl slide off the bench, her hand immediately finding Bailey's head, fingers curling into his soft fur like a lifeline. Judge Reynolds settled into her chair, her sharp gray eyes scanning the courtroom. She'd read the case file twice. A bitter divorce, allegations of emotional abuse, a child who had stopped speaking, and now a custody battle that would determine where this little girl would spend her future. On the left side of the courtroom sat Dr. Richard Carter, 43 years old, a successful cardiologist at Metropolitan Hospital. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His dark hair was styled perfectly, not a strand out of place. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He looked every inch the responsible, successful father. When he glanced back at Emma, his smile was warm, fatherly. But Judge Reynolds noticed something. The little girl went rigid the moment her father's eyes found her. On the right side sat Sarah Carter, 39, wearing a navy dress that had seen better days. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and dark circles shadowed her eyes, the badges of countless sleepless nights. Her hands trembled slightly as she organized papers with her attorney, a young woman named Jessica Martinez who looked barely out of law school. The contrast between the two parents was stark. Richard looked composed, confident, like a man who knew he'd already won. Sarah looked exhausted, desperate, like a woman watching her world crumble and unable to stop it. "Good morning," Judge Reynolds began, her voice firm but not unkind. "We're here for the custody hearing in the matter of Carter versus Carter. Before we begin with opening statements, I want to address the elephant in the room." She looked directly at Emma. "I understand that the minor child, Emma Carter, has not spoken in approximately 6 months. The court has received reports from Dr. Patricia Holmes, child psychologist, indicating a diagnosis of selective mutism, likely trauma-induced. Is this correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jessica Martinez stood quickly. "Emma has been in therapy twice weekly since the onset of her mutism. She's made progress in other areas, but verbal communication remains blocked." Richard's attorney, A silver-haired man named Robert Thornton, who exuded expensive competence, stood as well. "Your Honor, if I may, my client believes this selective mutism is a direct result of the mother's anxiety and instability. The child is manifesting the mother's mental health issues." "We'll get to that," Judge Reynolds said coolly. "Please be seated." Emma's fingers moved through Bailey's fur in a steady, rhythmic pattern. 3 quick strokes, pause, 3 more strokes, pause, 3 more. The dog remained perfectly still beneath her touch, as if he understood the importance of the moment. His brown eyes were fixed on the men and women in suits who would decide his girl's fate. Court Officer Michael Torres stood near the wall, his military bearing still evident despite his 15 years in civilian service. His job was to maintain order, to watch for disruptions, to ensure everyone's safety. But right now, his attention was drawn to the little girl and her dog. There was something about the way she touched the animal, something deliberate, almost methodical. Judge Reynolds cleared her throat. "This court understands that this is a difficult situation for everyone involved, most especially for Emma. However, I need to make a determination based on evidence and facts, not emotions. Mr. Thornton, you may present your opening statement." As Richard's attorney stood and began to speak, painting a picture of a devoted father fighting against a manipulative, unstable mother, Emma's hand never stopped moving. 3 quick touches, pause, 3 more, pause, 3 more. Bailey knew what it meant. Emma was calling for help. And somewhere in that courtroom, someone was about to hear her silent scream. Dr. Richard Carter rose from his seat with the practiced grace of a man accustomed to commanding respect. His hand smoothed down his silk tie, a subtle gesture that spoke of control and composure. As he walked toward the witness stand, his Italian leather shoes clicked against the polished floor with rhythmic confidence. This was a man who performed surgery on human hearts for a living. A courtroom was simply another operating theater, and he knew exactly how to handle the audience. "Please state your name for the record," the court reporter requested. "Dr. Richard James Carter." His voice was smooth, warm, even, the kind of voice that put patients at ease before he told them they needed open-heart surgery. Robert Thornton, his attorney, approached with a folder tucked under his arm. At 65, Thornton was a legend in family law circles. He didn't take cases he couldn't win, and his fees were astronomical. The fact that Richard could afford him spoke volumes. "Dr. Carter, how long were you married to Sarah Carter?" 11 years, Richard replied, his expression pained, as if the memory itself caused him physical discomfort. 11 years that I thought were happy. I loved Sarah. I still do in many ways. But over the past few years, her mental health deteriorated significantly. Emma's hand tightened in Bailey's fur. The dog's ears twitched backward, flattening slightly against his head. "Can you elaborate on that?" Thornton asked, his tone gentle, coaxing. Richard sighed, the picture of a burdened man trying to be fair. "Sarah has always struggled with anxiety. When we first met, it was manageable, but after Emma was born, it got worse. Postpartum depression, the doctor said, then general anxiety disorder. She was on medication, but she kept changing prescriptions, stopping them without telling anyone. The mood swings became unpredictable." "Objection!" Jessica Martinez jumped to her feet. "Speculation and hearsay. Mrs. Carter's medical records are private and—" "Your Honor," Thornton interrupted smoothly, producing papers from his folder. "Mrs. Carter signed releases for relevant medical records during discovery. These documents are already entered as Exhibit C." Judge Reynolds nodded slowly. "Overruled. Continue." Sarah's face flushed with humiliation. Emma watched her mother's shoulders slump, and the little girl's breathing quickened. Bailey shifted closer, pressing his warm body against her leg with more pressure. "Thank you, Your Honor," Thornton said. "Dr. Carter, how did Mrs. Carter's mental health affect Emma?" This was the moment Richard had been waiting for. He turned slightly in his chair, directing his words to Judge Reynolds with the earnest intensity of a man speaking painful truth. Emma became anxious, too. She started having nightmares, panic attacks. Sarah would keep her home from school for days at a time, claiming Emma was sick, but really, I think Sarah just couldn't bear to be alone. She was using Emma as an emotional support system. That's not healthy for a child. And when did Emma stop speaking? Richard's face arranged itself into an expression of deep concern. About 6 months ago, right after a particularly bad episode with Sarah, Emma had spent the weekend with me, a wonderful weekend, I might add. We went to the zoo, had ice cream, watched her favorite movies. She was happy, Your Honor. She was laughing. He paused, letting the image sink in. But when I dropped her off Sunday evening, I heard Sarah and Emma arguing, heated voices. When I called Monday to check on Emma, Sarah told me Emma had stopped talking entirely. Since then, Sarah has refused to let me speak with my daughter's therapist, blocked me from attending therapy sessions, and has essentially used Emma's condition to shut me out of her life. Your Honor, Jessica Martinez stood again, her voice tight with frustration. Dr. Carter was given multiple opportunities to attend therapy sessions. He canceled 4 appointments. Because I was performing emergency surgeries, Richard interjected, his voice rising with righteous indignation. I save lives, Your Honor. I can't just abandon my patients because my ex-wife schedules appointments without consulting my surgical calendar. Judge Reynolds held up her hand. Mr. Thornton, please instruct your client to wait for questions. Of course, Your Honor, my apologies. Thornton didn't look apologetic at all. He looked pleased. Richard's outburst had seemed genuine, passionate, the frustration of a dedicated doctor and devoted father being unfairly shut out. Across the courtroom, Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. Emma could see her mother shaking, could see her trying to hold herself together and failing. The little girl wanted to scream, wanted to run to her mother, wanted to tell everyone that her father was lying, that everything he said was twisted and wrong but no sound came. Her throat was locked, sealed by fear and trauma and the terrible weight of her father's threats. Bailey's low growl was barely audible, a rumble deep in his chest that only Emma could feel. Dr. Carter, Thornton continued, can you tell the court about your home and your ability to provide for Emma? Richard's demeanor shifted again, brightening. Of course. I own a 4-bedroom home in Westbrook Hills, excellent school district, safe neighborhood. Emma has her own room there, fully furnished with everything she needs. I have a stable income of approximately $450,000 annually. I can provide private schooling, therapy, medical care, anything Emma needs to thrive. Thornton pulled out photographs, entering them as evidence. Large, glossy prints showed Richard's beautiful colonial-style house with its manicured lawn. Emma's bedroom looked like something from a magazine, pink walls, white furniture, shelves filled with dolls and books. What the photographs didn't show was how cold that room felt. How Emma had sat on that perfect bed, paralyzed with fear, while her father's voice had hissed threats through the door. How she had learned to be absolutely silent, because any noise, any mistake, would trigger his rage. In contrast, Thornton said, producing another set of photographs, this is where Emma currently lives. The images showed Sarah's small apartment. Worn furniture, peeling paint in corners, toys scattered across a cramped living room. It looked tired, shabby, the home of someone barely scraping by. Mrs. Carter works part-time as a medical receptionist, earning approximately $28,000 per year. She's been late on rent twice in the past 6 months. She drives a 15-year-old vehicle that failed inspection last month. Thornton's voice dripped with disdain. Your Honor, the choice here should be clear. Which environment is better for a traumatized child? A stable, wealthy home with a successful father, or a struggling, anxious mother who can barely keep the lights on? Emma's hand moved faster through Bailey's fur now. 3 quick strokes, 3 more, 3 more. The pattern repeating, desperate, insistent. Richard looked back at his daughter and smiled, a warm, loving smile that would convince anyone watching that he was exactly what he claimed to be, a concerned father fighting for his child. But Emma saw something else in that smile, something no one else could see. A warning. Remember what I told you. Remember what happens if you tell. Judge Reynolds was writing notes, her expression unreadable. Sarah was crying softly. Jessica Martinez looked overwhelmed, outmatched by Thornton's experience and Richard's resources. And in the back of the courtroom, Court Officer Michael Torres was watching Emma's hand move through her dog's fur, his brow furrowed. 3 quick strokes. 3 more. 3 more. There was something about that pattern. The 10-minute recess felt like an eternity. Sarah Carter stood in the hallway outside Courtroom 4B, her back pressed against the cold marble wall, trying to remember how to breathe. Her attorney, Jessica Martinez, stood beside her, shuffling through notes with trembling hands. "He's burying us," Jessica whispered, her young face pale. "Reynolds is buying everything Thornton is selling. The income disparity, the housing situation, his credentials." "My daughter is terrified of him," Sarah said through gritted teeth. "Doesn't that matter?" "It matters if we can prove it. But Emma won't talk, Sarah. And without her testimony, without any evidence of abuse." Jessica's voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence they both knew ended with Sarah losing her daughter. Down the hall, Richard stood with his attorney, laughing quietly about something, completely at ease. He caught Sarah's eye and had the audacity to nod at her, a gesture that could be interpreted as respectful acknowledgement but that Sarah recognized for what it truly was, a reminder that he was winning. When they returned to the courtroom, Emma was exactly where they'd left her, hand buried in Bailey's fur, eyes downcast. Sarah wanted to run to her daughter, to scoop her up and flee this building, this city, this nightmare. Instead, she walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like water. "Please raise your right hand," the bailiff instructed. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" "I do," Sarah's voice cracked on those 2 small words. Jessica approached slowly, giving Sarah a moment to compose herself. "Mrs. Carter, how long have you been Emma's primary caregiver?" "Since she was born. I took a year off work after her birth, then worked part-time so I could be home with her as much as possible. Richard worked long hours at the hospital, 60, 70 hours a week. I was the one who fed her, bathed her, put her to bed every night. I was the one who sat up with her when she was sick, who taught her to read, who—" Sarah's voice broke. "Who knew her? Tell the court about 6 months ago. What happened?" Sarah's hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles turned white. Emma had a weekend visit with Richard, court-ordered visitation every other weekend. She was happy when she left Friday afternoon. Not excited, but, okay, normal. Sarah paused, steadying herself. When Richard dropped her off Sunday night, Emma was different. She wouldn't look at me, wouldn't let me hug her. She went straight to her room and locked the door. "What did you do?" "I tried talking to her through the door. No response. I thought maybe she was just tired, maybe they'd had a busy weekend. But Monday morning she still wouldn't talk. Not a word. She wouldn't eat breakfast. When I tried to get her dressed for school, she had a complete panic attack, hyperventilating, crying, shaking so badly I thought she was having a seizure." Emma's breathing quickened as her mother spoke. Bailey's head lifted, alert, his body tensing beneath the little girl's hand. "I took her to the emergency room," Sarah continued. "They ran tests, neurological, physical, everything. Nothing was medically wrong. The ER doctor recommended a child psychologist. That's when we met Dr. Holmes, who diagnosed Emma with selective mutism." "And in the 6 months since, has Emma spoken at all?" "No, not once." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "She communicates in other ways, writing, nodding, shaking her head. And Bailey has been her miracle. He's a trained therapy dog. Emma connects with him in ways she can't with people anymore. But speak? No. Whatever happened that weekend with Richard stole my daughter's voice. Robert Thornton rose to cross-examine, predator scenting blood in the water. Mrs. Carter, isn't it true that you were diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder in 2019? Sarah's face flushed. Yes, but... And isn't it true that you've been prescribed multiple anti-anxiety medications over the past 5 years? Yes, I have anxiety. That doesn't mean. Medications that you've stopped taking, restarted, changed multiple times without consistent medical supervision. Thornton's voice was sharp now, cutting. I was trying to find what worked, the side effects. Side effects that included mood swings, irritability, emotional instability. Objection. Jessica was on her feet. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained, Judge Reynolds said, but her expression was troubled. Mr. Thornton, ask your questions without the editorial commentary. My apologies, Your Honor. Thornton didn't look apologetic. He looked triumphant. Mrs. Carter, how many times have you been late on rent in the past year? Sarah's voice was barely audible. 4 times. How many times has your electricity been shut off for non-payment? Twice, but I got it turned back on within. How many times have you called in sick to work this year? I don't know exactly. Maybe 15. Emma needed me. She was having panic attacks. I couldn't just. 15 times in 10 months. That's more than once a month, Mrs. Carter. Your employer submitted documentation that you're currently on probation for excessive absences. Is that correct? Tears streamed down Sarah's face now. Yes, but you don't understand. My daughter needed me. She was suffering and I'm all she has and I couldn't. You couldn't maintain stable employment. You couldn't maintain stable housing. You couldn't maintain stable mental health treatment. Mrs. Carter, isn't it possible that Emma's selective mutism is a response not to anything my client did, but to the chaotic, unstable environment you've created? No, Sarah's voice rose, raw with desperation. You weren't there. You didn't see her face when Richard dropped her off. You didn't see the terror in my daughter's eyes. I see a lot of emotion, Mrs. Carter, but I don't see evidence. Do you have any proof, any at all, that Dr. Carter harmed Emma in any way? Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it. Her shoulders sagged in defeat. She won't tell me what happened. She can't. But a mother knows. A mother knows when something is wrong with her child. So your answer is no. No proof, no evidence, just suspicions and maternal intuition. Thornton's voice dripped with disdain. Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness. Sarah stepped down from the witness stand, her legs barely supporting her weight. As she passed Emma, she reached out to touch her daughter's shoulder, but Emma flinched. A tiny, involuntary movement that broke Sarah's heart all over again. Judge Reynolds watched this exchange, her pen tapping against her notepad. The case was becoming clearer in her mind, and she didn't like the conclusion she was reaching. Richard Carter had everything: wealth, stability, a pristine home, no mental health issues on record. Sarah Carter had love, yes, but love didn't pay rent. Love didn't provide security. And without evidence of abuse, without Emma's testimony, the law was clear about what was in the best interest of the child. Jessica Martinez stood, her voice shaking slightly. Your Honor, I'd like to call Dr. Patricia Holmes, Emma's therapist, to testify about the nature and cause of Emma's selective mutism. Proceed, Judge Reynolds said. As Dr. Holmes was sworn in and took the stand, Emma's fingers moved faster through Bailey's fur. The pattern was frantic now, desperate. 3 quick strokes, pause, 3 more, pause, 3 more, over and over and over. Court Officer Michael Torres moved closer to the bench where Emma sat, his eyes narrowing. He'd been watching the little girl throughout the entire hearing, and that pattern she kept making, it was too deliberate to be random petting. Too consistent. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. His mind flashed back to his military training, to those long nights studying communication protocols. Morse code. The universal distress signal. ... SOS. Tor's heart began to pound. The little girl was signaling for help, had been signaling for help this entire time, and no one had noticed. He glanced at Judge Reynolds, trying to catch her attention without disrupting the proceedings. She was focused on Dr. Holmes's testimony about trauma responses and psychological defense mechanisms. Torres looked back at Emma. Her eyes were squeezed shut now, tears leaking from beneath her lashes, her hand moving continuously through Bailey's fur. SOS, SOS, SOS. Help me, please, somebody help me. The dog seemed to understand. Bailey's entire body was tense, his eyes moving between Emma and the adults talking, as if he too was trying to communicate something vital that no one could hear. Torres made a decision. He moved to the side of Judge Reynolds's bench and quietly cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he said softly, "I need a word. It's urgent." Judge Margaret Reynolds looked up from her notes, her expression initially annoyed at the interruption. Dr. Patricia Holmes had just begun explaining the neurological basis of trauma-induced selective mutism, and Reynolds prided herself on never interrupting expert testimony. But something in Officer Torres' face, the tension in his jaw, the urgency in his eyes made her pause. "Dr. Holmes, please excuse me for one moment," Reynolds said, gesturing Torres closer. "Approach the bench, officer." Torres moved quickly, bending to speak directly into the judge's ear. His voice was low, controlled, but there was an undercurrent of something that made Reynolds's pulse quicken. "Your Honor, I need you to look at the little girl. Emma, watch her hand, the way she's touching her dog." Reynolds frowned, her eyes shifting to Emma. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just a traumatized child seeking comfort from her service animal. But then she focused on the movement itself. Emma's fingers weren't randomly stroking Bailey's fur. They were tapping. 3 quick taps, a pause, 3 slower taps, another pause, 3 quick taps again. The pattern repeated with mechanical precision. "I don't understand, officer. What am I looking at?" Torres' voice was tight. "That's Morse code, Your Honor. SOS 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. The international distress signal. That little girl has been calling for help for the past 45 minutes and we didn't see it." The blood drained from Reynolds's face. In 23 years on the bench, she'd never. Her eyes locked onto Emma's hand, watching the desperate pattern repeat. Once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. The rhythm was too precise, too deliberate. This wasn't a child petting a dog. This was a child screaming in the only way she knew how. "My God," Reynolds whispered. She looked at Torres. "Are you absolutely certain?" "Ma'am, I spent 6 years in Marine Corps communications. I could tap out Morse code in my sleep. That is SOS without question. And look at the dog, he's not relaxed. He's on alert. He knows something's wrong." Reynolds's mind raced. This changed everything. But she had to be careful, had to handle this correctly. If she was wrong, if Torres was mistaken, she could derail the entire proceeding, potentially traumatize the child further, and open herself up to accusations of bias. But if they were right? "Officer Torres, who else has noticed this?" "No one, as far as I can tell. Everyone's focused on the testimony." Reynolds made a decision. She'd built her career on trusting her instincts, and every instinct she had was screaming that something was desperately wrong. "I'm calling a recess. Immediately. I want you to quietly notify Mrs. Carter's attorney, Ms. Martinez, and Dr. Holmes. No one else. Especially not Dr. Carter or his attorney. Tell them to meet me in chambers in 3 minutes. Go." Torres nodded and moved swiftly but calmly, first approaching Jessica Martinez and whispering urgently in her ear. The young attorney's eyes went wide, her gaze snapping to Emma. Torres then moved to Dr. Holmes, still on the witness stand, and delivered the same message. Judge Reynolds struck her gavel once. "We'll take a 15-minute recess. All parties are to remain in the courthouse. Dr. Holmes, Ms. Martinez, please join me in chambers. Officer Torres will escort you." "Your Honor," Robert Thornton stood, his smooth voice holding a note of suspicion. "Is there a problem?" "Just a procedural matter, Mr. Thornton. We'll resume shortly." Reynolds's voice brooked no argument. She rose and exited through the door behind the bench, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Richard Carter watched the judge disappear, his expression unreadable, but something flickered behind his eyes, a calculation, a concern. He'd spent the entire hearing watching Emma, and he'd seen her hand moving in Bailey's fur, but it had never occurred to him that anyone would recognize what she was doing. He'd underestimated his daughter's intelligence, her resourcefulness. And potentially, he'd underestimated everyone else's ability to notice. Sarah sat frozen in her seat, watching Jessica Martinez hurry toward the judge's chambers with Dr. Holmes and Officer Torres. What was happening? Had something gone wrong? Her hands twisted together in her lap, anxiety climbing up her throat like bile. Emma remained on the bench, her hands still moving through Bailey's fur, but now there was something different in her posture. A tiny spark of hope in her eyes, as if she sensed that maybe, just maybe, someone had finally heard her. In chambers, Judge Reynolds paced behind her desk while Torres, Dr. Holmes, and Jessica Martinez stood in a tight circle. "Show them what you saw, officer," Reynolds commanded. Torres pulled out his phone and quickly searched for a Morse code chart. "Here, SOS in Morse code is ... .. Three short signals, three long signals, three short signals. That little girl has been tapping that exact pattern into her dog's fur repeatedly throughout this entire hearing." Dr. Holmes's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Emma knows Morse code." "Apparently," Torres said. "Or she knows SOS at least. Kids learn it from movies, video games, books. It's one of the most recognizable signal patterns in the world." Jessica Martinez was already pulling out her phone, typing frantically. "Sarah told me Emma was obsessed with a movie about shipwrecks a few months ago. She watched it over and over. There was a scene where survivors used SOS to signal for rescue." She looked up, her eyes bright with sudden understanding. "Emma found a way to communicate. She's been trying to tell us something this entire time." "But what?" Reynolds asked. "What is she trying to say?" "She's in distress," Torres said simply. "She's calling for help, that's what SOS means." Dr. Holmes stepped forward, her professional demeanor returning. "Your Honor, if I may, Emma has been in therapy with me for 6 months. She communicates through drawing, through simple gestures, and increasingly through Bailey. I've been trying to develop a more structured communication system with her, but traditional methods haven't worked. If she's found her own way to signal distress, we need to explore this immediately." "The question is," Reynolds said slowly, thinking out loud, "does she know more than just SOS? Can she communicate actual information?" "There's only one way to find out," Jessica said. "We need to talk to her, let her show us what she can do." Reynolds nodded decisively. "Dr. Holmes, you're Emma's therapist. You have the best rapport with her. I want you to work with Emma and her dog. See if she can communicate more than just a distress signal. But we need to do this carefully. If Richard Carter suspects we're onto something, he'll shut it down," Jessica finished. "Object claim we're coaching her, accuse us of manipulating a traumatized child." "Exactly." Reynolds's jaw set in a hard line. "So we do this by the book. Dr. Holmes, you're still under oath as an expert witness. I'm going to ask you to conduct a brief assessment of Emma's communication capabilities right there in the courtroom. It will appear to be part of your testimony. No one can object to an expert witness demonstrating their findings." "But what if she can't communicate?" Dr. Holmes asked. "What if SOS is all she knows?" "Then we've lost nothing," Reynolds said. "But if she can tell us more—" She didn't finish the sentence. They all knew what hung in the balance. Officer Torres spoke up. "Your Honor, that little girl has been desperately trying to be heard. Whatever she has to say, I think we owe it to her to listen." Reynolds looked at each of them in turn. A court officer, a young attorney, and a child psychologist. An unlikely team to uncover what might be the truth at the heart of this case. But sometimes justice came from unexpected places. "All right," she said, "here's what we're going to do." As they huddled together to plan, back in the courtroom, Emma's hand continued its steady rhythm in Bailey's fur. But her eyes were on the door to the judge's chambers, and for the first time in 6 months, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hoping. Someone had seen, someone had noticed. Someone was listening. When the courtroom reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted in a way that most people couldn't quite identify. Judge Reynolds sat a little straighter. Dr. Holmes remained at the witness stand, but there was a new intensity in her eyes. Officer Torres had positioned himself closer to Emma's bench, and Jessica Martinez clutched a notepad with white knuckles. Richard Carter felt it too, that subtle change in the air. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Years of maintaining perfect composure during high-stakes surgeries had taught him to hide his emotions, but some instinct deep in his gut whispered a warning. "Dr. Holmes," Judge Reynolds began, her voice measured and professional, "before the recess, you were explaining Emma's communication patterns. I'd like to explore that further. Can you describe the methods Emma uses to express herself?" Dr. Holmes nodded, shifting to face the courtroom. "Emma has developed several nonverbal communication strategies. She writes short notes, uses basic sign language, and responds to yes or no questions with head movements. But her most significant breakthrough has been her connection with Bailey." "Can you elaborate on that?" "Bailey is more than a comfort animal. He's become Emma's voice in many ways. She's taught him specific responses to her signals. For instance, Emma can indicate emotions through Bailey's positioning, guide him to point at pictures or words, and use him to express needs she can't verbalize." Robert Thornton's antenna went up. "Your Honor, this sounds like speculation. Has this communication system been documented, verified?" "That's exactly what I'd like Dr. Holmes to demonstrate," Reynolds said smoothly. "Doctor, would you be willing to conduct a brief assessment here in the courtroom? Show us how Emma communicates through Bailey." Sarah's heart leaped. She didn't understand what was happening, but she recognized the lifeline being thrown. "Of course, Your Honor," Dr. Holmes said, stepping down from the witness stand. She approached Emma slowly, kneeling to the little girl's eye level. Bailey's tail gave a single wag of recognition. "Hi, Emma," Dr. Holmes said softly. "I know this is scary, sweetheart, but Judge Reynolds and I think it's really important for everyone here to understand how you and Bailey talk to each other. Would that be okay?" Emma's eyes were huge, glossy with unshed tears. She glanced at her mother, then at the judge, then at her father. Richard's face was a mask of concern, but Emma saw beneath it. She saw the warning in his eyes, the tightness around his mouth. "Don't you dare. Remember what I told you. Remember what happens." But Emma's hand was tired. 6 months of tapping SOS into Bailey's fur. 6 months of screaming silently. 6 months of carrying a weight no 8-year-old should bear. Slowly trembling, Emma nodded. The courtroom went utterly still. Dr. Holmes pulled a folded paper from her pocket, an alphabet chart she'd quickly printed during the recess. She spread it on the floor in front of Emma. "Okay, sweetheart, I'm going to ask you a question and you can use Bailey to help you answer. Can you do that?" Another small nod. "Emma, are you scared right now?" Emma's hand moved to Bailey's head. The dog stood immediately, walked to the chart, and placed his paw on one word Dr. Holmes had written at the top. "Yes." The courtroom collectively held its breath. "Okay, good," Dr. Holmes said encouragingly. "Emma, can you tell us what you're scared of? Use Bailey to show us the letters." Emma's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Her small hand shook as she guided Bailey's nose toward the alphabet chart. The dog moved with perfect precision, nosing letters one at a time. They. The courtroom watched in absolute silence. They. Sarah's hand covered her mouth. They. Jessica Martinez began writing frantically. They. Robert Thornton rose from his seat. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We have no way of knowing if the child is being coached. Sit down, Mr. Thornton. Reynolds's voice cracked like a whip. This child is communicating for the first time in 6 months. We are going to listen. Why? Richard Carter's face had gone pale. His hands gripped the table in front of him. Emma's shoulders shook with silent sobs as Bailey completed the word. Daddy. You're scared of your daddy, Dr. Holmes said gently, her own voice thick with emotion. Can you tell us why, Emma? What are you scared of? Emma's breathing was rapid now, her small chest heaving. Bailey pressed against her, solid and warm and safe. She guided him back to the letters. H. U. R. T. S. M. E. He hurts you, Dr. Holmes repeated. Every eye in the courtroom was on Emma now. How does he hurt you, sweetheart? Richard shot to his feet. This is outrageous. My daughter is being manipulated. Dr. Carter, sit down, Judge Reynolds commanded. Officer Torres, if Dr. Carter cannot remain seated and silent, please escort him from the courtroom. Torres moved closer to Richard, his hand near his restraints. Richard slowly sank back into his chair, but his eyes were blazing. Emma was crying harder now, but her hand kept moving. Bailey kept following her guidance, patient and loyal. S. C. R. E. They. M. S. Pause then. N. They. M. E. S. He screams at you and calls you names, Dr. Holmes said, her professional composure cracking. What else, Emma? What else happened? G. R. They. B. S. Emma's hand moved to her own arm, indicating. He grabs your arms, Dr. Holmes said, hard enough to hurt. Emma nodded, tears streaming. Sarah was openly weeping now. My baby, my poor baby. Your Honor, this is a farce, Thornton tried again, but his voice had lost its confidence. The child is clearly being led. The child is spelling words, Reynolds snapped. Unless you're suggesting Dr. Holmes has telepathically taught a dog to spell in the last 15 minutes, Mr. Thornton, I suggest you remain quiet. Emma wasn't finished. Her hand moved again and Bailey returned to the chart. T. Though. L. D. M. E. Every letter felt like lifting a boulder. Emma's whole body shook with the effort of finally telling the truth. Like. F. T. E. L. L. M. Though. M. J. They. Like. L. Dr. Holmes's eyes widened. He told you if you told, your mom would go to jail. Emma nodded frantically. What else did he say would happen? Bailey moved again. B. They. Like. L. E. Y. D. Like. E. The courtroom erupted. Sarah let out a sob that echoed off the walls. Jessica Martinez was on her feet, tears streaming down her own face. Officer Torres' jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. Judge Reynolds's gavel came down. Order, order in this court. But the damage was done. The truth was out. A little girl had been terrorized into silence, threatened with the loss of everything she loved, and had carried that burden for 6 long months. And she had found a way to speak anyway. Richard Carter sat frozen, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. His hands trembled, the steady hands of a surgeon who held human hearts, now shaking with the realization that his world was collapsing. Emma buried her face in Bailey's fur, her small body racked with sobs. But there was something else in her shaking now. something that hadn't been there before. Relief. The secret was out, the truth was free. And for the first time in 6 months, Emma could breathe. The courtroom had transformed into something Judge Margaret Reynolds had never witnessed in her 23 years on the bench. The formal boundaries between parties had dissolved. Sarah had moved from her seat and was now kneeling beside Emma, not touching her. Dr. Holmes had quietly warned her not to overwhelm the child, but close enough that Emma could feel her mother's presence. Bailey stood between them, the bridge connecting mother and daughter, his tail wagging slowly as if he understood the magnitude of what was happening. "Emma," Dr. Holmes said softly, pulling another sheet from her folder, this one with simple pictures and words. "You're doing so incredibly well, sweetheart. I know this is hard, but we need to understand everything. Can you keep going? Can you tell us more?" Emma's tear-streaked face lifted. Her eyes found her mother's, and Sarah saw something she hadn't seen in 6 months. Connection. Real, genuine connection. Sarah nodded encouragingly, her own tears falling unchecked. Emma's hand moved to Bailey's head, and the dog turned back to the alphabet chart. W. E. E. K. E. N. D. "The weekend visits," Dr. Holmes said. "Something happened during the weekend visits." Emma nodded vigorously, then guided Bailey to continue. L. A. S. T. T. L. M. E. "The last time 6 months ago, that's when it got worse." Another nod. Emma's breathing was coming faster now, but she pushed forward. Her small hand trembled as she directed Bailey. S. P. L. 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 E. D. J. U. L. C. E. Dr. Holmes kept her voice steady, professional, though her heart was breaking. "You spilled juice. What happened when you spilled juice, Emma?" Bailey moved to a new section of the chart where Dr. Holmes had drawn simple emotion faces. Emma pointed him to the angry face, then back to letters. Y. E. L. L. E. D. Then more letters, coming faster now, as if a dam had broken inside Emma. L. L. U. D. H. U. R. T. E. L. R. S. He yelled so loud it hurt your ears. Dr. Holmes translated, her voice thick. Robert Thornton tried once more, his voice desperate now. "Your Honor, we have no way to verify." "Mr. Thornton," Judge Reynolds's voice was ice. "If you interrupt these proceedings one more time, I will hold you in contempt. This child is providing testimony in the only way she can. We will hear it." Richard Carter had gone from pale to flushed, his composed mask completely shattered. "She's lying. She's a child, she doesn't understand. I disciplined her, yes, but I never." "Dr. Carter, you will be silent." Reynolds's gavel crashed down. "Officer Torres, if he speaks again, remove him." Torres moved to stand directly behind Richard, his hand on his belt. The message was clear. Emma was still going, her courage building with each letter. The words came pouring out now through Bailey's movements. C. L. 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 E. D. M. E. S. T. U. P. L. D. Sarah's hand covered her mouth, stifling a sob. B. L. D. W. L. R. T. H. L. E. S. S. Jessica Martinez was recording everything, her pen flying across her notepad, tears blurring her vision. "What else, Emma?" Dr. Holmes asked gently. "What else did he say to you?" Emma hesitated, then pointed Bailey to a picture on the sheet, a picture of a mother and child. then to another picture, prison bars. Then she spelled S, L, I, D, P, L, I, C, E, T, L, K, E, M, M. He said the police would take your mom away if you told, Dr. Holmes confirmed. Emma was sobbing now, but she kept going. She pointed to a picture of a dog, then to an X mark. B, L, I, L, E, Y, G, L, W, L, Y, F, L, R, E, V, E, R. He threatened to take Bailey away forever. Emma nodded, her small body shaking. Bailey pressed closer to her and she wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. But her hand emerged, still determined to finish. N, E, V, E, R, S, E, E, M, L, M, L, G, L, I, N. The courtroom was absolutely silent except for the sound of crying, Sarah's sobs, Jessica's sniffles, even Bailiff Johnson discreetly wiping his eyes. Judge Reynolds removed her glasses and pressed her fingers against her eyes. In all her years on the bench, she had never felt such a combination of rage and heartbreak. This little girl had been terrorized into silence, threatened with losing everything she loved, and had endured 6 months of psychological torture because she was trying to protect her mother and her dog. "Is there more, Emma?" Dr. Holmes asked gently. "Anything else you need to tell us?" Emma guided Bailey one more time. S, C, L, R, E, D, L, L, T, I, M, E, then D, 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 Y, H, T, E, S, M, E. That last revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her baby had believed her own father hated her. Richard Carter's face was in his hands now. Whether from genuine remorse or the realization that his carefully constructed lies had collapsed, no one could tell. Judge Reynolds took a deep breath and addressed the courtroom. "We're going to take a 30-minute recess. Dr. Holmes, please remain with Emma. Mrs. Carter, you may stay with your daughter. Officer Torres, Dr. Carter is not to leave this building or make any phone calls. Mr. Thornton, I suggest you consult with your client about changing his plea in this matter." She stood, and everyone else rose automatically. "And someone get that brave little girl some water and tissues," Reynolds added, her voice softening. "She's earned them." As Reynolds disappeared into her chambers, Emma remained on the floor with Bailey and her mother. Sarah had finally moved close enough to put her arm around her daughter, and Emma, for the first time in 6 months, leaned into her mother's embrace. "You did it, baby," Sarah whispered. "You told them you were so brave, so brave." Emma's hand found Bailey's fur again, but this time the pattern was different. Not the frantic SOS that had been her desperate cry for help. Just gentle strokes, the kind a little girl gives to the dog who saved her life. Across the courtroom, Richard sat with his attorney, his head bowed. The image of the successful, caring father had evaporated, leaving behind the truth, a man who had wielded fear like a weapon against his own child. Officer Torres stood guard, but his eyes kept returning to Emma. He'd been a Marine, had served in combat zones, had seen brave men and women face down enemy fire, but he'd never seen courage quite like what this 8-year-old girl had just displayed. Bailey's tail wagged slowly, contentedly. His job was done. He'd helped his girl find her voice when no one else could. And in that moment, Everyone in Courtroom 4B understood that they'd witnessed something extraordinary. The moment when silence became speech, when fear became courage, and when a little girl's love for a dog gave her the strength to finally tell the truth. The 30-minute recess stretched to 90 minutes. Behind closed doors, Judge Reynolds had made urgent phone calls to Child Protective Services, to the district attorney's office, to a forensic child psychologist who specialized in trauma cases. What had begun as a custody hearing had transformed into something far more serious, a potential criminal investigation. When court reconvened, 2 additional people sat in the gallery: Detective Lisa Chen from the Family Crimes Unit and Dr. Raymond Foster, a forensic psychologist with 30 years of experience in child abuse cases. Their presence sent a clear message. This was no longer just about custody. This was about justice. Judge Reynolds addressed the courtroom with steel in her voice. "We are resuming these proceedings, but the nature of this hearing has fundamentally changed. Based on Emma Carter's testimony, I have requested the presence of law enforcement and additional expert witnesses. Dr. Foster, please approach." Dr. Foster, a dignified man in his 60s with kind eyes and gray hair, took the witness stand. Judge Reynolds swore him in quickly. "Dr. Foster, you've had the opportunity to observe Emma's communication during our recess. What is your professional assessment?" Dr. Foster's voice was measured, authoritative. "Your Honor, I've worked with traumatized children for 3 decades. What I witnessed today is consistent with severe psychological abuse and coercive control. The child's selective mutism, her fear response to her father, and the specific nature of her threats, these are textbook indicators of a child who has been systematically terrorized." "Can you explain coercive control for the court?" "Certainly. Coercive control is a pattern of behavior where one person uses threats, intimidation, and isolation to dominate another. In Emma's case, her father allegedly created a prison of fear. By threatening the 2 things she loved most, her mother and her dog, he effectively silenced her. This is not discipline. This is psychological warfare against a child." Robert Thornton shifted uncomfortably. His earlier confidence had evaporated entirely. Dr. Foster continued, "What makes Emma's case particularly significant is the intelligence and resourcefulness she displayed. Learning Morse code, developing a communication system with her service dog, these are the actions of a child desperately trying to survive and be heard. The fact that she maintained this SOS signal for months shows extraordinary persistence and courage. In your professional opinion, Dr. Foster, is Emma's testimony credible?" "Absolutely. Children rarely fabricate detailed accounts of abuse, especially when that abuse is psychological rather than physical. The specificity of Emma's claims, the spilled juice incident, the verbal abuse, the threats, these details have the ring of truth. Moreover, her terror is genuine. You cannot fake the physiological responses I observed. The elevated heart rate, the trembling, the tears. This child has been traumatized." Judge Reynolds nodded. "Thank you, Dr. Foster. Detective Chen, you've been consulting with the district attorney's office during the recess. What can you tell the court?" Detective Chen stood, her posture professional and precise. "Your Honor, based on Emma's testimony and Dr. Foster's assessment, the DA's office is opening a formal investigation into Dr. Richard Carter for child abuse, specifically psychological abuse and coercion of a minor. We'll be interviewing teachers, neighbors, medical professionals, anyone who had contact with Emma during the relevant time period." Sarah felt hope surge through her chest for the first time in months. Finally, someone believed them. Finally, someone was taking action. "Additionally," Detective Chen continued, "we're requesting that all of Dr. Carter's visitation rights be immediately suspended pending the outcome of our investigation. We believe Emma may be in danger if any contact continues." Richard Carter finally broke his silence, his voice ragged. "This is insane. I'm a doctor. I save lives. I would never." "You terrorized a child into silence. Judge Reynolds's voice thundered through the courtroom. Your own daughter was so afraid of you that she stopped speaking for 6 months. Don't you dare talk to me about saving lives when you destroyed your daughter's sense of safety. The outburst was unusual for the normally composed judge, but no one objected. The emotion in the room was palpable, visceral. Dr. Foster spoke up again. Your Honor, if I may add something. I asked Emma a few questions during the recess using her communication method. I asked her if the abuse was only verbal or if there was physical contact. She indicated that her father grabbed her arms hard enough to cause pain, shook her on multiple occasions, and once locked her in her bedroom for 3 hours as punishment for crying. Sarah's gasp echoed through the courtroom. She hadn't known about the locked bedroom. How much had her baby suffered in silence? I also asked Emma if she ever tried to tell anyone before, Dr. Foster continued. She indicated that she tried to tell her father's girlfriend during one visit. When the girlfriend left the room, Dr. Carter allegedly told Emma that if she ever tried that again, he would make sure her mother had a terrible accident. That was the final threat that took her voice completely. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. The depravity of using such threats against a 7-year-old child was almost incomprehensible. Jessica Martinez stood, her voice stronger now, emboldened by the truth finally emerging. Your Honor, in light of these revelations, we request an immediate emergency order granting full custody to Sarah Carter, a permanent restraining order against Richard Carter, and supervised therapeutic support for Emma as she begins to heal from this trauma. Judge Reynolds didn't hesitate. Granted, all of it, granted. She turned to Richard Carter, and her eyes were hard as stone. Dr. Carter, you are hereby stripped of all custody and visitation rights to Emma Carter, effective immediately. You are not to contact, approach, or communicate with your daughter in any way. A restraining order will be issued requiring you to stay at least 500 feet away from Emma and Sarah Carter at all times. Do you understand? Richard's face had gone ashen. His career, his reputation, his carefully constructed life, all of it crumbling in real time. Your Honor, please, I can explain. There is no explanation that justifies what you did to that child, Reynolds said coldly. Officer Torres, please escort Dr. Carter from this courtroom. Detective Chen, he's all yours. As Torres and another officer moved to flank Richard, the fallen doctor looked across the courtroom at his daughter one last time. Emma didn't look away. For the first time in 6 months, she met her father's eyes without flinching. Bailey sat beside her, solid and protective, and Sarah's arm was wrapped around her shoulders. Emma had found her strength, she had found her voice. And her father no longer had power over her. As Richard was escorted from the courtroom, the relief in the room was almost tangible. Sarah pulled Emma close, tears of joy and sorrow mixing on her face. Jessica Martinez smiled through her own tears, knowing they had just witnessed something remarkable. Judge Reynolds watched Emma carefully. The little girl looked exhausted, emotionally drained, but there was something else in her expression too. Peace. The truth had set her free. 3 months had passed since that extraordinary day in Courtroom 4B. The maple trees outside the courthouse had shed their autumn leaves. Winter had come and gone, and now spring was painting the world in shades of green and gold. Inside Judge Margaret Reynolds's chambers, a very different kind of hearing was taking place. Emma Carter sat in a comfortable chair, Bailey resting at her feet as always. But today, something was different. Today, Emma was here because she had asked to be. And today, Emma was going to speak. Take your time, sweetheart, Judge Reynolds said gently, leaning forward with an encouraging smile. There's no rush. Emma's hand rested on Bailey's head, drawing courage from her faithful companion. Sarah sat beside her, close enough to provide support but far enough to let Emma have her moment. Dr. Holmes was there too, smiling with the pride of a teacher watching her student graduate. Emma's lips parted. Her throat felt tight, The word stuck behind 6 months of silence and 3 months of careful, patient healing. But she had come so far. She had been so brave. She could do this. Thank. Her voice was barely a whisper, rusty from disuse, but it was real. It was her voice. Thank you. Judge Reynolds's eyes filled with tears. In her 23 years on the bench, she had handed down thousands of rulings, but she had never felt as much satisfaction as she did in this moment. Thank you, Emma, Reynolds said softly, for being brave enough to tell the truth. You saved yourself, sweetheart, you and Bailey. Emma's small hand squeezed her mother's, and Mom and Dr. Holmes and Officer Torr's. Each word came easier than the last, like a rusty gate slowly opening. Everyone listened. Sarah couldn't contain herself anymore. She pulled Emma into a tight embrace, tears streaming down her face. My brave, brilliant girl, I'm so proud of you. So proud. Over the past 3 months, the investigation into Richard Carter had expanded far beyond anyone's initial expectations. Detective Chen had uncovered a pattern of psychological manipulation stretching back years. Richard's girlfriend had come forward, confirming Emma's account and adding her own experiences of Richard's controlling behavior. Colleagues at the hospital reported incidents of his explosive temper. His pristine reputation had been a carefully maintained facade. The medical board had suspended his license pending criminal charges. The district attorney was building a case for child abuse, criminal coercion, and endangering the welfare of a child. Richard Carter, once a respected cardiologist, now faced the possibility of prison time. But more importantly, Emma was healing. The journey hadn't been easy. The first words had come in whispers during therapy sessions, simple sounds that gradually formed into words, then sentences. There had been setbacks, days when the fear crept back and Emma's voice disappeared again. But each time Bailey was there and Sarah was there, and slowly, steadily, Emma found her way back to speech. Dr. Holmes had called it remarkable. Most cases of trauma-induced selective mutism take years to resolve, she had told Sarah during one session. But Emma's intelligence, her resourcefulness in creating the SOS signal, that same strength is helping her heal faster than I've ever seen. The turning point had come 6 weeks after the hearing. Emma had been playing with Bailey in their small apartment when she suddenly looked at her mother and said, clear as day, "I love you, Mommy." Sarah had collapsed to the floor, sobbing with joy, and Emma had joined her, and they had held each other while Bailey wagged his tail and licked away their happy tears. Now, in Judge Reynolds's chambers, Emma wanted to share something else. I wrote something, Emma said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Can I read it? Of course, sweetheart. Emma pulled a folded paper from her pocket. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady as she began to read. My name is Emma Carter. I am 8 years old. For a long time, I couldn't talk because I was too scared. My daddy told me bad things would happen if I told the truth. He said Mommy would go to jail. He said Bailey would die. He said I would never see Mommy again. I believed him because I was little and he was big and grown-ups are supposed to tell the truth. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes, listening to her daughter's words. But then I remembered something from a movie, SOS. It means help. So I taught myself to tap it in Bailey's fur. I did it every day, hoping someone would see, and Officer Torres saw. He noticed when nobody else did. Emma looked up from her paper directly at Judge Reynolds. You could have ignored me. You could have said I was too little to know anything. But you listened. You made everyone stop and listen to what I was saying, even though I couldn't say it with words. Judge Reynolds had to remove her glasses and wipe her eyes. Dr. Holmes taught me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing hard things even when you're scared. I was scared every day, but Bailey helped me be brave, and now I'm not scared anymore. Emma folded her paper carefully. I wanted to say thank you to everyone who listened, and I wanted other kids to know if you're scared and can't talk, there are other ways to tell. Draw pictures, Write notes, find signals, someone will see, someone will listen, you just have to keep trying. The room was silent for a long moment, heavy with emotion and admiration for this extraordinary little girl. Judge Reynolds came around her desk and knelt in front of Emma. "You know what, Emma? I've been a judge for a very long time. I've seen a lot of brave people in my courtroom, but I have never seen anyone as brave as you." Emma smiled, a real genuine smile that lit up her whole face. Bailey helped. "Yes, he did," Reynolds agreed, reaching out to pat the golden retriever's head. "He's a very good boy." As they prepared to leave, Officer Torres appeared at the door. He had requested to be there for this moment. "Emma," he said, kneeling down to her level, "I have something for you." He handed her a small box. Inside was a pin, a golden SOS signal in Morse code. 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots. "This is for you," Torres said, "to remember that you saved yourself, and to remind you that you're never alone. There are always people watching, people who care, people who will listen if you just keep signaling." Emma's fingers traced the pin, tears streaming down her face. But they were good tears now, healing tears. "Thank you," she whispered, then louder, stronger, "thank you." 6 months ago, Emma Carter had walked into a courtroom unable to speak, terrorized into silence by the person who should have protected her most. Today, she walked out with her voice restored, her courage recognized, and her future bright with possibility. Bailey trotted beside her, tail wagging, his job complete but his loyalty eternal. Sarah held her daughter's hand, grateful for second chances and golden retrievers and judges who listened. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Emma made a promise to herself. She would use her voice now. She would speak for kids who couldn't speak for themselves. She would be brave just like Bailey had taught her. Because sometimes, the smallest voices carry the most important messages. And sometimes, all you need is one person to notice your signal in the dark. The end.